Prepare to experience the strongest radio allowable by law. Secrets will be revealed. Myths dispelled. From the studio gym where excuses never apply, it's Superhuman Radio with your host, Carl Lenore.
Hey, welcome back to another episode of Superhuman Radio. Today is an episode of the Pep Talk. Some of you have been missing these. We're going to start doing more of them again. It's May 8th, 2020. We are 51 days into the COVID-19 compression home incarceration program. I'm in my room all by myself, so I don't have to worry about it. I'm always social distancing. In fact, I am such a boring person that I just realized I've been social distancing my whole life. So I'm all prepared for this. We have a great show today. We're going to be talking about a unique peptide called GHK-cu. The Cu stands for copper. All of its benefits with Dr. Elizabeth Yurth. We're going to start on that topic in just a minute. But I just have to remind you that our title sponsor is Legendary Foods, and they have a super deal for my audience. You can save 10% off everything at eatlegendary.com by using the code SHR10. Their tasty pastry is ridiculously amazing. It looks and actually tastes better than a Pop-Tart, but it has less than 1 gram of sugar and less than 3 to 4 grams of net carbs, depending on which flavor you go. 3 if it's the cinnamon, 4 if it's the strawberry. These things are amazing. You will love them, and quite frankly, your children will love them, which makes them even better because you can fool your kids and send them to school with this stuff, and their friends are going to think they're eating garbage, but they're really not. And then, of course, while you're there, check out their seasoned nuts and ridiculously delicious nut butters. All of these have less than 1 gram of sugar, and this is, if you're a low carb person, you understand the value of not consuming a lot of sugar, then you are going to love the people and the stuff they have at eatlegendary.com. 10% off. Check it out and tell them that Carl sent you. So now we're going to bring my guest on, who is a returning guest, and many of you appreciate and love her, and that is Dr. Elizabeth Yurth. Oh, wait a minute. What happened? I did something wrong. Just give me 1 second. There we go. Hide that. There we go. There she is. Oh, one more thing to hide. Yeah, I'm my own producer here at the studio. How you doing, Dr. Yurth?
I'm great, Carl. Thanks.
It's been a while. So
it's been a while.
We have a lot of catching up to do. So we're going to talk about a peptide that's very, very popular right now. A lot of people are paying attention to it. I've got lots of questions about it. The one thing I didn't list here, and I should have, and I just remembered it, is hair growth. So we're going to work that into the discussion as well. But just for people who aren't aware, what is GHK-cu?
So GHK is really a naturally occurring peptide in our body. It's really just 3 amino acids. And unlike some of the synthetic peptides, this is a peptide that we make. And like a lot of the important peptides that our body makes, we make a lot more of it when we're young. So when we're 20 or younger, when we're growing, we have tons of GHK. We've 200 nanomoles per mil, and then it starts to actually decline. So 2021, it actually starts to drop off. And by the time you're our age, Carl, you have about a quarter of that or less. And so whenever we see these peptides that are very high when we're youthful and everything's healing well and great, and then they drop with age, we know that they're probably an important component to the whole aging process. So, those naturally occurring peptides that are high when we're at our best and low when we're at our worst, by the time you're 80, this peptide is almost non-existent and become very, very important. That's where we sort of have established. This peptide got discovered in 1970s. So it's Dr. Picard discovered this. I think he's 91. If any of you guys ever seen him, he looks still amazing at 91. He's still doing research. He's still practicing. Yeah, I
wonder if he must use it himself.
I'm sure he uses it. Yeah, and he he's still out there lecturing. He's still doing research. So at 91 or 92 years old. So it's certainly a testimony to his own stuff. But he discovered this back in the 70s. And we now have learned a whole lot more because we've sort of found all these amazing things it does. You sort of listed them at the beginning. But now and it was almost one of those maybe peptides that I think maybe got a little discounted because it was too good to be true.
Yeah, there are a lot of those. And I want to say something. I need to say something. You just made me think of something. So I receive emails from time to time from people who watch versions of the Pep Talk. And they'll say to me, peptides don't work. Because I took this peptide or I took that peptide and it didn't change anything. I didn't notice anything. And I want to just make sure that people understand something, that, peptides are very valuable and they are very effective, but you need to make sure your expectations are a little realistic.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing is going to change your condition overnight. Nothing. It took you decades to develop your symptoms, and it's going to take a while for them to go away. And so I just want to say that, because when we talk about these peptides, we talk about them, and especially if I'm the one doing the talking, glowingly. Oh, these things are amazing. But that doesn't mean that taking it for a week, a month, or sometimes even 6 months is going to miraculously reverse your. They are working. There are clinical ways to evaluate how they're working by looking at the markers of your disease and how they're changing. But you may not notice anything initially because you didn't notice anything the 5.5, 10 years that you were developing this problem until the symptoms showed up. So I just want to put that out there.
Yeah, so, anyway. I'm glad you said that, because, I think we battle this a lot in clinical practice, where people, I think they've gotten adjusted to some medication that gives you this sort of rapid effect, right? You put cortisone in somebody and they have a pretty rapid effect from it. And remember, peptides are very homeostatic. They're balancing. And most things that are homeostatic, meaning they sort of balance things, are going to have a much more slow effect to get you where you want to go. And so we battle this. People come in and they pay this money, and 4 weeks later, they're like, well, I'm not better. And we really encourage people, you've got to stick with this stuff. And we make everybody actually at least enroll in a 12-week program so that we can actually, at least show them they're starting to make some results, because at 4 weeks, they're probably not going to. So it's really important to know anything that's more of a balancing or homeostatic effect is not going to all of a sudden, push you over the edge and have you have all these dramatic feelings, but neither will it be dangerous, and neither will it have all the bad effects that like a lot of drugs do. So I'm glad you did mention that, because I think we fight that a lot.
Well, and let's also expand on that just for a second longer, because it's worth saying this. So pharmaceutical drugs are designed to mask symptoms. Peptides are fixing the problem. It takes longer to fix the problem than it does to just cover it up with some other problem.
Exactly.
So that, I received a message today from a person battling Crohn's disease asking about peptides. And when I listed some peptides that can be effective, I also said, but you first must remove the insult. Like if you're still eating corn and grains and foods that we know exacerbate Crohn's disease, you could take all the peptide you want. It's not going to change. So, peptides are great. They're wonderful. They are amazing and exciting, but they're not going to cover up the things that have taken you a decade to have occur.
Right.
So let's talk about skin first, because this is an exciting one, especially because this peptide is about 380 Dalton, which puts it well under the 400 to 500 Dalton range for topical and transdermal delivery. What are the effects on skin that we see?
So I think that's probably where it's most used, maybe somewhat unfortunately most used in that realm, because that is, it's where it's I think it got its start. And I think it's still where we sort of pull it out. And even in my own practice, as I was looking at all this information on GHK, I was like, wow, we should be using this in a whole lot more diseases than we actually do. But we think about it for skin because it has a very dramatic effect on helping collagen integrity. So it actually doesn't just sort of hide wrinkles, but it actually is restoring the integrity of the collagen, and actually at the stem cell level. So when you look at its effect, it actually is changing the production of the stem cells in the skin. So you're actually restoring more regenerative or more youthful skin. It also has a really nice effect to protect the skin against oxidative stress. So, sun damage, those types of things. So you're not only tightening the collagen, actually activating this P63, this skin stem cell, but also protecting against the damage that we're exposed to every day from environmental things like the sun or the chemicals that are in the air. So there's not really anything else that does that. If you look at most cosmeceuticals, so things that we're putting on our skin, they're not really healing things the way our body does. So it's actually, if you look to the differences between young and old skin, that this actually will sort of take time back. And it's pretty amazing. You have to be diligent with it. You have to use it all the time. There's formulations, there's different strengths of it. But if you're consistent with it over time, people will see, skin integrity improve, as well as they'll see like dark spots go away. So it's been pretty remarkable. You can get it sometimes. We are working in TaylorMade used to, but they don't have any more formulation that had it mixed with argireline and lufazole, which actually act like Botox. And you put those two things together, and you'd actually have almost an instant effect. We're hoping to get that formula back from another place soon. So there's some really cool things you can do with this. And it's funny, I hadn't used GHK on my skin for a long time, and started back on it. And even my eyelashes actually grew longer, I think, just from getting around my eyes.
Well, we're gonna get into that too.
So it's pretty amazing.
We're gonna get into hair in a second. What does the GHK stand for? I know the CU stands for copper.
So it's the three, the glycine, help me.
I know. It's the 3 amino acids, the glycine, the histidine, and something else, right?
Yeah. So it's the 3 amino acids that make it up, basically.
Okay. So let's go right to the one. So I first learned about GHK-cu when reading a French study. It was translated into English by a scientist who claimed he regrew hair using it. And he injected it directly into the scalp, which led me to advise people who wanted to regrow hair to buy GHK-cu, reconstitute it, get one of those little micro-needling rollers that women can buy in cosmetic stores, squirt it on your scalp, and then kind of do like you're seeding your scalp. And now no one's ever contacted me back and said they've done it or that it's worked. But what are the effects on skin? I mean, on hair?
So we do that. So we actually, have people do a dermal roller on their head. It's a little uncomfortable, I guess, but they dermal roll their head, and then they apply a GHK, copper foam that it's made into sort of a foam, or so
it sticks around. Yeah.
Right. And you put it over that. And again, just like it's working for skin, it actually will re-stimulate hair follicles activity again. And this is interesting because a lot of the ways GHK works is more from genetic expression, and that may be how it's helping with hair. Again, restoring some of the stem cell activity, but it actually is changing some of the genetics so that you actually will, change the genes responsible. We know that there's a genetic responsibility for hair loss as well as hormonal and environmental, but that you actually will modify some of the genetics involved in hair loss. So that's one of the cool things about this peptide is it's actually changing things at a genetic level, not just kind of, maybe stimulating a process. It's actually changing the genetics. So it's really, super interesting. It works quite well. You can use it in combination with some other things, like we'll use it with zinc thymulin, which also helps with the hair growth. So if you use those two together, you can get some pretty marked improvement in hair growth. It's a little.
Do you see any changes in hair pigment? Do you see any like I've heard people say, "Oh yeah, my hair started getting darker," and it may make sense because of the copper component.
Yeah, I guess that blue tinge, because it does have a blue tinge to it, because copper is blue. It does have a blue tinge to it. I could see potentially, particularly a gray hair, you might start to see some darkening of the hair. I have actually heard that from patients who have gray hair as well, and that may again be more stimulating some of the stem cell activity, so that some of the actually natural pigment comes back in your hair. I haven't noticed that dramatically, but a lot of my guys who are using it they do have a fair amount of hair loss. And so they're doing it more on the
and they did notice you noticed sprouting of new hair, huh?
Very much so. So if you're one of those guys who has the little patch back here, you can very nicely just then roll right over that patch. My husband, I do it to my husband, but he thinks I'm abusing him if I derma roll his head.
You know what's funny? That balding in the back of the head, as opposed to the temples.
Yeah,
that correlates with heart disease.
Yeah, there is some interesting correlation there. Because this is more, the androgenic alopecia is more
right
here, and this is a little bit more probably. And again, you're actually dating things back a little bit to some of the genetics. There's some genetics you can look at that correlate with the genetics of heart disease. You'll see that. So that's interesting, and that may be where this GHK copper, because we know it actually has cardiovascular benefits too, partly by lowering fibrinogen levels. So that may be one of the correlates that we're seeing is it's actually changing the genetics.
Interesting. So could you take this systemically if you inject it and have a lot of the benefits we're going to talk about today, even the ones that seem to reach out to the skin and the hair?
Yeah, in fact, so, this question's been put out a lot because it is well absorbed transdermally.
Right.
You would think you get more bang for your buck by injecting it. And so you definitely can inject it. My opinion is you probably will get more systemic effects injecting it, at least at not having to use as much of the volume. We know that transdermal application of anything, hormones, anything, you're going to get some good absorption, but you have to use more than if I subcutaneously inject it. Right. So you can subcutaneously inject it. And then there's some question with, if you subcutaneously inject it, do you actually need it bound to the copper? Because, GHK is basically most of our copper is bound to albumin. So we have 700 times more albumin than we have GHK. So most of our copper is bound to albumin. And then, so if you just inject GHK, there's a lot of excess copper that can be utilized. It can bind the copper that's already readily available in serum and go to the site. And the upsides of that is we're probably going to reduce the likelihood of any kind of copper toxicity, which I think is very rare. You need a lot of copper for copper toxicity, but it doesn't hurt as much for the injections. Because one of the downsides of the GHK copper is it burns a lot when you inject it. If you take the copper out, it doesn't burn as much. So the question is, do you actually need the copper bound to it or not? Or can you just use GHK, eliminate the burn? It gets the copper it needs from the albumin, and then what albumin does is acts as a transporter of copper, and the GHK actually acts at the level to modify the genetics to actually have the effect. So you need both. You need albumin to carry the copper. You need GHK to have the effects of the copper, and it's why remember we talked about that whole looking at those 10 lab variables that predict age.
Yes.
One of the top ones, remember, was albumin.
Yeah.
Right? Interesting. So how does that correlate? Well, we know that as albumin levels drop, so do you get this changes in modifications in copper levels. And we now know that low copper levels are predictive of neurodegeneration, kidney degeneration, liver degeneration. So there may be some correlation here between the GHK and the albumin both being low as we age, correlating to that copper transport. So if we
is it possible that you get just GHK as a
you
peptide?
can get GHK without the copper, yes. So you can. So the question is, who needs the GHK with copper and who needs just the GHK, right? And that's where I think we don't really have a real clear understanding. Because I think there's some definite benefits and of just doing the GHK. I think it
sounds to me like I'd rather have just GHK, because I get plenty of copper in my diet. I eat meat, I eat vegetables. I've got
probably
plenty
have high albumin levels because of your overall health. I think maybe if you have some of these really sickly people who have very low albumin levels and have poor diets, that maybe doing the GHK copper together might be important. And I think in most people who are sort of the people we work with a lot, maybe you can get away with just doing the GHK. You're not gonna have, so transdermally you want the copper because the skin doesn't have the copper. So do you want the copper?
Right.
But internally, it should be able to bind the copper it needs and then still have the genetic effects to have all these modifications. And so, and then the dose, I heard Dr. Picard talk about this, and he said, well, the dose is anywhere from 1 to 20 milligrams, which doesn't help so much. I think the dose is probably somewhere around 2 milligrams, although when you look at people's responses, there are people who say when they hit the optimal dose, they had a really dramatic, almost instantaneous effect on like mood, because it has definite effects on anxiety, say pain. And so there were a lot of people who said when they got double that, like 4 milligrams sub-Q, they almost instantaneously felt better. Their pain went away. So I think there's still a little question about what the right dose is. I think a 1 to 2 milligram a day dose is probably where most of us would start. Again, you're a little limited by cost in this peptide. It's not cheap.
Yeah. No, I know. What about cognition? What research is out there that shows that this peptide aids in cognition?
So huge for both cognition and, you and I talked some time ago about ERA-290 and cibinetide. And this drug may have very comparable type effects on neuroregeneration. So both peripherally and centrally. They did a great study out of India. I think it was about 2 years ago. Dr. Ahmad out of India did a study where they just took nerve fibers, and just by adding the GHK copper to the nerve fibers, they had significant sprouting.
Wow.
There's been some really interesting studies on Alzheimer's too, where the portions of the brain that were most affected by PET scanning, where at death, those patients, when you biopsy that part of the brain, had the lowest levels of copper. So we know there may be a pretty significant link between dementias and low copper levels. Now, is that because GHK levels drop, right? So GHK levels, the question is, well, is there not enough copper, or can you not get it to the cells because your albumin's low, so you don't have carriers, and you also don't have the ability to have the effect of the copper, because it has to be bound to GHK to have the effect. So if my GHK levels, if I'm 70 and my GHK levels are a tenth of what they need to be, then the copper doesn't do me any good. So we know that it's not just the copper in the diet. There's been a lot of studies showing almost in young people with low copper, right, that there's almost an MS-like effect. In fact, I had a patient who actually was diagnosed with MS, and she came to me, and her brain scan looked like MS, but we got intracellular copper levels on her. They were super, super low. When we replaced the copper, her brain scan normalized. It didn't have the little white lesions that were suggestive of MS. Her symptoms all went away, and she was great. So we know that this actually has a very similar effect on nerves, even to things like MS. So low copper is a piece, but if I give somebody copper and they can't do anything with the copper, it's not doing them any good.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. Is there, just like we know there are people who hyperabsorb iron, and are there malabsorbers? Is there a polymorphism for a malabsorption of copper?
Because I don't know the genetics, but the big group that you'll see are people who have had bariatric surgery. So people who've had bariatric surgery don't absorb copper. And I don't think most of the bariatric surgeons tell their patients that. And that's why there's this link between bariatric surgery and progressive dementia.
This is amazing. I have a very, very close friend who underwent bariatric surgery about a decade ago. And he has developed socks and gloves neuropathy. But he also has problems, like he has good days and bad days, he'll say. And he attributes it to a car accident he had, that his brain was shooken. But I have to bring this to his attention now, because he may be a malabsorber of copper.
Right. Honestly, you have to bring that to attention. I don't ever see the doctors tell him to take B12. They give him actually this very special multivitamin, but it doesn't have enough copper in it. This group also inherently lots of times has lower levels of GHK. Maybe that linked to their obesity, we don't know, but they have lower levels of GHK as well. So I think here's a peptide where you give them GHK. In that case, I would give it with the copper, right? GHK with copper subcutaneously injected to replace that, and hopefully you'll prevent a lot of that and maybe help us peripheral neuropathy.
Isn't too much copper only a problem in the face of too low of zinc?
Too low zinc, right? It's that ratio that you need, right? So you need 5-to-1 ratio of zinc to copper. So if your zinc levels get too low, then the copper levels become toxic. Now you can start, and the interesting thing about copper toxicity is you'll notice changes well before you have any kind of bad systemic things. Like you'll notice, the luna of your nail, the little nail bed starts turning, getting a little blue. So you'll start noticing kind of this bluish tinge to your fingernails, sometimes the iris. So, so those are things that kind of suggest probably your overall copper levels are getting too high. So it's one of those, yes, too much copper bad. Yes, it is, particularly in the face of too low zinc. But it's pretty hard to get that to that.
Well, it sounds to me like if you think you have too high of copper, the answer isn't to try to cease any copper intake, but it's to raise zinc intake.
Yeah, I wouldn't tell people to go take massive doses of copper. And part of that is that, remember the unbound copper, so the stuff that's not bound to your albumin or your GHK is probably the riskier piece. And so if you have low albumin levels and you have low GHK levels, and then you're taking massive amounts of copper, number one, it's not doing you any good. Number two, that's where you may start to have some issues with it. So I think that's one of the keys. When we follow albumin levels, people who are unhealthy have horrible albumin levels. People who are old have horrible albumin levels. So you've got to work on all those pieces. So that's where this it's not so simply take more copper. But you are right. If you take adequate amounts of zinc, it takes a lot of copper to ever become toxic.
Well, and you know what group of the population have excessively high copper in the face of excessively low zinc, and that's vegans, the strict vegans. I've done several shows where vegans have come on my show who stopped being vegans, and they talked about, like, when they got their blood work done, that their copper was ridiculously high, and that affects the brain. You start to feel euphoric and woozy, and you kind of like just don't have your balance and stuff. And then they said, once I started eating red meat again, that just went away like in a day. So yeah, they run the risk of very high copper levels.
And that's why too, the low albumin levels, right? Most vegans have low albumin levels. And so, so there's that all kind of links together. So we're gonna find, and then again, the whole thing now, Carl, that this whole, nervous system destruction, all of this stuff, when you go through all this stuff, okay, oh, wow, it fixes my skin, it regenerates the stem cells of my skin. Wow, it regenerates the follicles of my hair. Wow, it has all this kidneys, nervous system. That's where I think this peptide got a little bit of this sort of rap of wow, well, no peptide can do everything.
Snake oil. Yeah. As soon as you see a peptide that can do a lot of things. But what we do notice, the irony of that is that what we do notice is that these di and tripeptides, these really small ones, they seem to have pleiotropic effects where some other peptides just have a narrow scope of effects. It's almost like the larger and longer the peptide is, the more specific its target. But these smaller peptides, they seem to they kind of like they're a common denominator for a lot of things.
Yeah, I think maybe that's so you can some of those very small peptides you can probably take back to from a
evolutionary standpoint.
Yeah, that they were there and they've been maintained from a very small organisms to us, and those are the most important things for us, right? Like LL37, like the antimicrobial peptide and LL37, that's been preserved for across every species for a million years. So why is that? Those are the very important things to our body, and this will go along with it. And again, it's going to come down to, we can talk more about the whole genetic modifications, the number of genes that's changing.
Yeah, we're going to take a quick commercial break. If you want to reach out to Dr. Yurth, you can by going to boulderlongevity.com. There's a way to message, and Dr. Yurth is licensed to do telemedicine in a multitude of states in the United States. So if you're listening to her and you're thinking, oh my God, I wish I had her as my doctor, but I live in Florida or I live in some other state, don't be discouraged. Reach out to her, because what percentage of your practice now has become outside your own state?
It's a lot, it's probably 50% of our patients are from out of state now. We have a lot.
So there you go.
It's a lot.
There you go. So reach out, go to boulderlongevity.com and send a message. Make sure you let them know that you heard about her here on Superhuman Radio. We're going to take a quick commercial break. We'll be right back with more of this fascinating peptide. Stay tuned.
Men and women, you've heard about hormone optimization. Do you feel like it's something you want to look into? RenewLifeRx.com is the place to start. Their doctors can help you with the solutions. RenewLifeRx.com has a simple process for lab work, consultation, and taking a deep dive into where your hormone levels can be improved. Superhuman Radio listeners get 30% off your initial lab work and consultation. Go to RenewLifeRx.com to schedule your no-obligation phone consultation today. Feel younger, get in better shape, and be more productive at RenewLifeRx.com. New Mass Pro Synthogen X2 just upped its own legendary game. To distance itself even further from the rest of the pack, Synthogen X2 now has double the key active ingredients. If you've ever wondered what steroid-like recovery feels like, Synthogen X2 delivers. See why others compare it favorably to powerful bodybuilding drugs at Synthogen.com. Mass Pro Synthogen. When you train with it, you'll gain with it.
Do you remember those delicious toaster pastries you had when you were a kid? The rectangular sugar-filled snacks? Well, guess what? Legendary Foods has just made low-carb toaster pastry. This is the first of its kind, and honestly, these things are amazing. They have 3 to 4 net carb, less than 1 gram of sugar, and 9 grams of protein. You can eat them right out of the wrapper or lightly toast them. The only question is, which flavor? Strawberry or brown sugar cinnamon? They're available at eatlegendary.com and Amazon.
7,451. That's how many people kick the bucket, buy the farm, or cash in their chips every day in the United States. Yep, that means 5 people are going to meet their maker during this commercial. And no, our commercials are not the cause. Half of those who punch the clock for the final time will do so without life insurance. Call Big Lou at Term Provider before you're number 7452. If you're a 50-year-old male, a tad porky with a touch of diabetes, $1 million of term life insurance may only cost about $200 a month. With more verified 5-star reviews than any other Lou on the radio, Big Lou has saved thousands of people thousands on their term insurance premiums. Stop procrastinating and call Big Lou today at 800-560-0301. 800-560-0301. Remember, Big Lou's like you. He doesn't want to be number 7,452. Call 800-560-0301 or biglou.com.
Quest Nutrition makes bars, cookies, chips, and pizzas out of complete dairy-based proteins. Our products minimize net carbs and sugar without sacrificing taste. Each delicious chocolate-flavored chip, cookie chunk, and crunchy crumble is custom-made to maintain Quest macros. It's time to enjoy foods that work for you, not against you. It's time to enjoy your Quest.
Welcome back. We're talking with Dr. Elizabeth Yurth. We're talking about the peptide GHK-cu. The Cu stands for copper. It's a fascinating peptide, and really, it really has never truly been popular like it should be. It kind of reminds me of beta-alanine. You know, beta-alanine was what the Korean speed skaters used when they won 8 gold medals one Olympic season. But it was overshadowed because Mark McGuire was using androstenedione, and that was sexy. That was like, oh, that makes testosterone. And no one paid attention to beta-alanine. This peptide is like one of those. It's been around. No one's ever really gone, this is a great peptide, because every time you turned around, there was a growth hormone secreting peptide or this peptide. And it just never really got the coverage that it really deserved. So it's worth talking about it a few times if we need to. So there's a lot of things that it does, but I also saw some studies that show that it's very, very protective for people undergoing chemotherapy for cancer. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. I think that, again, this is because of it has such cellular protection across the board, right? So when you look at damage from chemotherapy, one of the big things is the sort of free radicals that are formed that then cause all the oxidative stresses and cause cellular aging and cellular death and all these bad things to occur. So one of the big things that GHK copper does is it acts as a very, very potent antioxidant. And again, kind of at a genetic level. So it's actually upregulating the genes that will help to promote ways to get rid of these free radicals that are formed. Part of the way it's doing that too is actually its interaction with iron. So one of the things that GHK copper does is it reduces free iron. Mostly the iron that's bound to ferritin is reduced by about 80%. So the free iron released by the ferritin is reduced by about 87% simply by adding GHK copper on. So we know that when you have high serum iron levels, right, that all these free radicals are much more dangerous to us.
That's me. High iron levels.
Right.
I should be taking this stuff.
Yeah, you should be taking this stuff. This really protects against high iron, really does. It really keeps that modulated so that even if your ferritin levels are running a little high, you're not going to have the free iron circulating around that's causing the cellular damage because it's of that interaction between the free radicals. Remember, it's that free iron combines with the free radicals to form all these bad toxic elements. And if you don't have that, you won't have as much problem. So that's probably one of the big ways it's working is helping in this antioxidant properties to sort of get rid of all the toxins that are formed. So you don't get the cellular damage. And also, again, because it actually promotes, it has we used to be a little bit afraid of this drug from a perspective of cancer because it's very angiogenic, right? It forms a lot of new blood vessels. That's how it heals neurons. That's how it helps the brain. It helps with wound healing. So it forms a lot of new blood vessels. And we tend in medicine to shy away from anything that forms new blood vessels in cancer because we're thinking, okay, that's what last thing you want to do.
But see, this is the crazy part about treating cancer. If we treated other diseases the way we treat cancer, then, like for instance, if we treated a disease, we said, well, you know what, everything that feeds cancer also feeds the good cells too, but we're going to make killing the cancer priority, so we're going to kill some good cells too. It's just crazy. You know, we have to focus on killing the cancer and leaving the rest of the body intact so it can fight against the disease. Instead, we killed the cancer. Like I said years ago, I said chemotherapy, treating cancer with chemotherapy is tantamount to burning down the entire house because you have a stain on your carpet.
Right. Yeah, you're exactly right. And that's so now we actually know, and now there's several studies out showing its benefit in metastatic cancer, particularly like colon cancer, pancreatic cancer, melanoma. There's been significant studies to show that GHK copper actually slowed or halted the progression of the cancer cells. And that's because, remember, go back to that genetic regulation, it's a genetic modifier. And so we saw that it upregulated P53 and some of the other really important genes for getting our body back into a state of more normal apoptosis of cancer cells. So we want those cancer cells to die. They shouldn't be alive. There's something gone awry that's making them continue to reproduce. So what this does is at a genetic level, it puts back the genes that will help to now kill off the cancer cells the way they're supposed to go. And that's why it can do all these amazing things. It's such a genetic modifier. So are you familiar, Carl, with the MIT Harvard connectivity map at all? So they developed, I think it was 2012.
Is that the one we talked about on the show with you
I don't
one time?
I don't think so. So MIT and Harvard in 2010 put together all this artificial intelligence that looked at all these different substances and their effect on transcription of our DNA, right? And the computers could take all these different substances and look at how they affected the entire genome almost. And then it would come up with what substances had the most marked effect positively on our genetics. And then they could pin it out to say, what were those effects? So there's thousands and thousands of substances that have now been analyzed. And GHK copper is one of them that's been run through this connectivity map. And it had such marked effects. And it was, I think, over 500 genes were positively modified by GHK copper. So it was on the top of this kind of connectivity map. It was one of the top substances for positively modifying our genetics. If we can get our genetics perfect, right? If we have them all positive, if everything's being, we're born with bad or good genetics. But as you've talked to Tom from Chronomics and Dr. Seeds with talking about the chronomics. Well, it's not our genetics, right? It's how they're expressed. Right. So what GHK copper does is it goes back at the genetic level and it makes your genes express in a good way. So that's how it's so beneficial, even though it's causing angiogenesis, on stopping cancer, because we get those bad genes to go the other direction.
Right. We have a question from Natalie Niederman. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, Natalie. Could it possibly help people that have hemochromatosis? It's hemochromatosis. Sorry.
Yeah, so that's an interesting question, Natalie. I think that because in theory you would think it should, right? Because you have these high, and the only thing we really know right now to treating hemochromatosis is to have people go really go donate a lot of blood. But probably they're still running a lot of that time with high iron levels. I do think, and I've never seen any research on it, and I certainly would love to sort of do some studies on that, because I really think it would modify, because it would really downregulate that circulating iron that's causing so much tissue damage and liver damage. So I think it would have actually a very beneficial effect. But to my knowledge, there's not any research using it.
So this is just like my mind working. There's nothing behind what I'm about to say. But if there were ever people who were genetically engineered by evolution to be vegans, it's the people who suffer from hemochromatosis. Because think about it, from an evolutionary standpoint, if we could say that this is a mistake, we could say that this is a genetic mistake, it's an anomaly, right? But what if it's not an anomaly? What if it's these people had less red meat, animal protein, and they had to survive? So they were selected for people that could extract iron, where I don't extract iron easily from plant sources, and most of us don't. But these people were so efficient at extracting iron that when you put them into a modern society where they can eat meat all the time, they end up with too much iron and too much hematocrit as a result. So it would almost seem like this is an individual who should consider a high plant-based diet because they're not going to accumulate as much iron. Good. Now, what do you think of that? Crazy?
I think it's interesting. It is, even when you put people with hemochromatosis, and it kind of depends on the type and the extent, even when you put them on a super, super low or no red meat diet, you'll still see high iron levels in them. So I think they certainly probably thrive better than that way, but I think it's a genetic mutation. Still, I think not, it's probably still a genetic mistake in a sense. It'd be interesting too, to even go back and look at that genetics and look at what copper might be doing even at that transcription level for those genetics. Again, those are kind of cool things. I think this peptide has been overlooked from a lot of medicinal purposes like that. So, we could probably go back to that connectivity database and say, okay, what are the genes that are, causing, and there's a multitude of them for hemochromatosis. Are they secondarily modified? You could do that with chronomics too, right? So this company out of London that now is looking at how your genes are being transcribed. Well, you have these bad genes. If we put you on GHK copper, would they actually be transcribed differently? Would your iron?
We're gonna find out, because I just got my chronomics test a couple days ago, and I'm going to be doing it this weekend. And you can bet I'm going to start using GHK copper.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, after I get off the show, I'm going to order some, and I'm going to start using it because I'm really excited. It's funny. I wasn't that excited about this peptide before we started talking about it, but now I'm thinking to myself, damn, I need this peptide actually.
Yeah, I was the same way, Carl, because I use this peptide a ton in my patients, but primarily for skin stuff. We do use it. I think we probably use it more than a lot of doctors do for some, for other purposes, because we do know its benefit. But as I kind of was going through and, looking at just how incredibly beneficial this peptide was, I was like, Jesus, it's one of those peptides like my growth hormone secretagogues that I really should probably have everybody on. I mean, it's something that is high when we're.
It's a foundation. It's a foundational peptide. It has clear effects. So my friend,
you have to have it for wound healing. You have to have it for tissue repair. You have to have it for adequate expression of your genome, which remember, as we age, our genetics change, right? And that's the epigenetics. So it's damage to our DNA now makes it express differently. So we can repair that damage and get these with this peptide. Could we prevent a lot of aging? I suspect so. I mean.
And we're going to talk about you've already given me a snapshot into the dosing, but I'd like to hear your opinion a little bit later in the show. We'll probably when we wrap the show up. How long does it take to start seeing the effects or noticing the effects? So my friend Bill is listening live on the live audio stream, and he said, "What about the heart? Does that, because he's dealing with some issues right now, and he's a very, very fit guy, but he just got a surprise. Is there any benefit to taking GHK copper for the heart?"
Definitely. So it has really significant cardiac benefits, partly by its effect on fibrinogen. It lowers fibrinogen, and we know that's helpful even in people, but a lot of the cardiac dysfunction is oxidative dysfunction, right? So it's endothelial and oxidative dysfunction. And this is very reparative to that. Really interesting studies with this peptide in people who have higher LDLs. So we know that people who have high LDLs, but they have very low fibrinogen levels, actually the LDLs don't end up very problematic. They don't end up with heart attacks and strokes. But people who have higher fibrinogen levels and high LDLs do not do well. So we try and keep fibrinogen levels low in those people, but that's hard to do. How do you keep fibrinogen levels low? One of the things GHK copper does is it lowers fibrinogen. So, so that even in the face of higher LDLs, higher oxidative stress, you don't have the problems. So I think it has benefits for both your patients who have cardiac plaque, who have vessel disease, and probably some effects from cardiomyopathy, and that's more on some mitochondria.
Yes, and I'll tell you where the cardiomyopathy angle comes from. So I read a study many years ago that showed that they took rodents and they did the aortic clamp on them to create the pressure, and they gave them cardiomyopathy.
Right.
But the rodents that did not develop cardiomyopathy from the aortic clamp was supplemented with the equivalent of about 2 milligrams of copper in human form a day.
Yeah.
And the copper seems to protect the heart from undergoing those changes that lead to cardiomyopathy. And so I've always said to bodybuilders that are using anabolics and also training hard, make sure you get enough copper. And most of them do in their meat and stuff like that. But then again, we come back to this kind of curveball you threw earlier that maybe not everybody absorbs copper very well. Well, here's a great way to get your copper.
Right. And I might argue that it's not as much the copper, right, as it is that decline in GHK, and so even if the copper levels become marginal, right, and you can't get it, you can't have an effect, because you absolutely have to have the GHK for the copper to take its effect. Even if you have high albumin or good albumin levels, so even if you're great with your albumin, that's a carrier. You still need the GHK, and nobody on their own, unless I guess you're some kind of superhuman, that has nice, great GHK levels when they're our age. You just don't. It's one of those unfortunate things, like your hormones and everything else. Everything declines. So again, if you kind of look at aging, we'll put back all the stuff synthetic peptides are great. We can do a lot with them. But in my mind, the peptides that were there in our body when we were at our best, at like 18, 19, 20, well, those are probably the ones that we want back in our body now, right?
Most important, absolutely.
Even more so than thinking about the copper effect, because that is going to be thinking about getting the GHK on there so it can have its benefits.
Yeah, this is really an important peptide. It's been overlooked. I mean, I've talked about it before on shows with you, but we've never really done this kind of a deep dive on it. And this is why it's so important to do one show about one peptide, as opposed to trying to do one show about 1,000 peptides and jam everything in people's ears. You don't get this deep dive. We're going to I'm sorry.
So it's so much more valuable to just go into one peptide and learn all about it, because we can't all take 10 peptides. And you listen to these shows and I'm like, oh, I guess I need that and that and that. And you can't. You'd be broke. And you
can't have the little nuances where we kind of go off the path and then come back. This is the way to do it. We're going to take a quick commercial break. And when we come back, we've got more. Stay tuned. I'm just trying to get things lined up here. Here we go. Are you looking for a better way to absorb the nutrients you need? Do what I do and start your day with lipospheric supplements from Live On Labs. Unlike pills and powders, Live On's patented liposomal encapsulation technology transports nutrients like vitamin C, vitamin B, glutathione, acetyl L-carnitine, and alpha-lipoic acid to where they need to be, your cells. Visit try.liveonlabs.com/Carl to learn why I take these supplements every day to help me perform in the gym and in life. That's try.liveonlabs.com/Carl. Ever wish there was a precise way to gauge your recovery from workout to workout? Or wonder if the money you're spending on your nootropic supplements are actually improving brain function? Maybe you're aging and you're noticing some changes in memory. Wouldn't being able to really test your brain be of great value? Well, now you can with great accuracy with the Brain Gauge. The Brain Gauge lets you test essential components of brain health and track your brain health history, and all in the comfort of your own home. Go to gaugeyourbrain.com and use code SHR for $150 off this amazing device. That's gaugeyourbrain.com and SHR for $150 off. How often do you sit with your laptop right on your lap? How much time do you spend on your cell phone? Are you in a technology-packed office Monday through Friday? Are you worried about this type of radiation? Now there's something you can do about it. GetLambs.com. This radiation has been linked to infertility in men, glandular tumors, gut microbiome dysbioses, and impaired sleep quality. Now you can provide 360-degree protection to at-risk parts of your body with radiation-proof apparel from GetLambs.com. Comfortable, breathable, and 99% effective. Go to GetLambs.com and use coupon code SHR for 20% off your order of $100 or more. That's GetLambs.com, GetLambs.com, and code SHR. Crank your muscle gains to new heights by transforming every gram of protein you eat into 3 grams with Masszymes. With 100,000 HUTs of protease per capsule, Masszymes increases your absorption of key amino acids, resulting in stronger, healthier digestion of proteins and certain vitamins that not only multiplies the impact of the protein you eat, but can also repair a damaged intestinal wall. Go to Masszymes/SHR for 10% off. That's MASSZYMES.com/SHR. I love beef, and if you love beef, listen up. I've discovered the best tasting beef in the world, and that's not an exaggeration, at Piedmontese.com. The Piedmontese breed is famous from Italy for being lean and unbelievably tender with half the fat and calories of traditional beef. Even typically tough cuts are tender when it comes from the Piedmontese cows. And for the first time ever, Piedmontese cows are being raised here in the USA. Get 2 free 10-ounce New York strips when you purchase $50 or more at Piedmontese.com with code SHR. Go to PIEDMONTESE.com and use code SHR today. You will never eat any other type of beef ever again.
This is the Superhuman Channel, where brawn and brains finally meet.
Welcome back. We're talking with Dr. Elizabeth Yurth. Her practice is at boulderlongevity.com. You can reach out to her. She is available to help you. What states don't you work within, Dr. Yurth?
Right now, I have Texas. Texas is a little hard to get your license in, but they sort of emergently right now with the whole COVID thing. So there's about 35 states that we're working with, and Texas is right now included in that. I'm not in New York.
Yeah, no one is. New York literally outlaws telemedicine, which I can't believe they do that, especially in today. Yeah. It's easier probably just to check on our site. We'll give you that. So, couple questions that I just thought of that I want to work in here before we move on. Any value to intranasal GHK?
So, it's interesting that this molecule actually appears that if you put it into a liposomal form, it might be even well absorbed orally. I've seen some evidence of and intranasally, but I don't know of anybody who makes the compound. Like a lot.
I did a DIY on how to make your own intranasal.
Yeah, I saw that.
I by the way, I've been experimenting with intranasal melanotan 2, and I love it. I'm going to tell you why. I take 100 micrograms in each nostril first thing in the morning. I don't need coffee. It wakes me up. I literally feel it. It has a nootropic effect. My tan is more natural. My lips don't turn purple. When I inject it, my lips literally turn blue because of the melanin in my skin. And my tan is much more natural. Even Elisa says it's much more natural. Zero nausea, zero wonky feeling at all. It's great. We started using melanotan as an intranasal. It was called nasal tan. We used to get it from London like 10 years ago. We used to use it, and we just used it before vacation to get a base tan, and it works great. So it's interesting that everybody does it as a cutaneous injection. It works great as an intranasal, and I agree with you. I thought it worked a little bit better. I liked your little demonstration of how to do that. I know there are some peptides that don't work well intranasally, but this one does look like one that should be pretty easily used. So it kind of surprises me. We'd have to ask some of the pharmacists why they're not making it that way. And again, even in a liposomal form, it looks like it might actually be able to be absorbed through, as an oral form. And I've seen some patents that are kind of, back looking at it for purposes for that. So I think the opportunity is there to do more with this peptide. We just have to sort of keep working with it. Well, Dr. Seeds talks about how it's a powerful and wonderful anti-inflammatory. I mean, it works so well. And if you want to avoid brain inflammation, I think, well, why not just deliver it through the nose? That was my original thinking. And the mood, the libido, everything is there except any of the negatives that I hated about it. I don't get dark moles. My lips don't turn blue. I don't get nauseous.
Right. You still get some of the immune benefits. I agree. I think that's a great way, and it surprises me that, and I think, I know you can still buy it through United Kingdom, places like that. You can still get it as a nasal form. So I'm kind of surprised we don't do more of it here. And again, so you're kind of just brought this up because I was going to talk about the intranasal there too. Is from a brain perspective, not only pain but just sort of anxiety too. So GHK copper, and I think this is one of its really cool uses that we could do. So one of the things we know is they did a study. I can't remember when the study came out where they took healthy young men and they made them copper deficient. They took copper completely out of their diet, and then they measured opioid receptors. So we make our own opioid peptides, basically, right? We have our own natural opioids, and they dropped 85%. If I recall, it was 85% of their opioid receptors drop, or opioid peptides, internal or endogenous opioid peptides dropped simply by being fed a low copper diet. So they became super, super pain sensitive. Everything they did hurt to touch their skin. And then they fed them back copper and it reversed. So we know that copper has a very, very important effect for our for pain perception because it has some regulation to our own opioid peptides. But beyond that, we now know that there's about 9 different genes positively regulated that affect pain tolerance by GHK copper. So again, we're going back to its genetic effects. We know, that there's people who are much more sensitive to pain than others, right? You can take some people and you could cut their leg off and they hardly wince, and some people you barely touch them and they're wincing. And medicine that's huge. And you don't really, we always go, oh, those people are wimpy. No, they're just genetically they're more prone to pain. So this may be that sort of bring it back to we'll optimize the genetics. So 9 different genes were positively regulated to make people less pain sensitive by GHK copper. So that's cool. You're actually changing people's genetics so they're more able to tolerate pain. So take these people who have chronic pain, what are our options, right? We use all these horrible drugs, which now opioids or
killing people,
right?
Right.
And so this may be a really safe, healthy option. And it may actually have, if you even did it for a little while, a change in the genetics enough that their pain goes away because they're just less pain sensitive. But also it's a really good anti-anxiety effect. When they did the GHK copper with mice and they put them into these really stressful mazes, the normal mouse got really fed up and just shrunk into a corner, and the GHK copper mice actually just kept trying. So they had much less anxiety production. They had much more motivation using this. So again, win-win, right? Here's a peptide that seems to do nothing bad. In fact, if you look at the negatives to this peptide, it's aside from copper toxicity, which we talked about, exceedingly rare, there doesn't appear to be downsides to this peptide.
We have to answer a question here. Nick Rose says, TaylorMade said intranasal melanotan causes BP spikes. Yeah, it's transient. When you first take the blast, dopamine immediately goes up within seconds, and you kind of get a head rush, but then it goes away. So it's not like it raises your blood pressure the entire time that you're under its influence. It raises it for moments after you use it. They found the same thing with intranasal PT141. It's a transient response to the introduction of this to your brain, and then it just levels out and goes back to normal.
Right. It's very transient. So, and that's interesting. So one of the things GHK copper can do is drop blood pressure. And so if you do a whopping sub-Q dose, one of the things they have seen is people rapidly dropped out their blood pressure. It does have a more sustained effect on blood pressure. So if you have high blood pressure, that might be another benefit. But if you're very low blood pressure, that may be an issue in dosing it up. And that may be an issue if you did the intranasal, because again, with intranasal, you do get a very rapid absorption.
Yeah.
And so you may drop out blood pressure, but it'd be something. So it has the opposite effect, actually drops blood pressure. So you have to watch hypotension with this. Most people, that's not a big issue. I haven't seen anybody who have to discontinue it because of that. But again, if you're dosing it high sub-Q, it would be something to watch for.
Yeah, I mean, even sub-Q PT141 can raise blood pressure, and so can injected melanotan too. A lot of people have, but it's transient when it's used in a intranasal delivery. It rises. It doesn't rise for even hours. It rises for minutes after you apply it, and then it drops. Now, if there are people out there who have problems where they're very sensitive to a rise in blood pressure, maybe they've got some thrombosis that they're taking blood thinners for, maybe they've got some other issues, then yeah, giving it to them probably isn't a good idea, because chances are if you scare them, it's not a good idea. They're going to have an event from that. But we're talking about healthy people who have normal blood pressure response. It rises for a couple of minutes and then it just goes away.
Right, Nick. Yeah, I think what Carl was saying. So if you had somebody who was uncontrolled hypertension and they're always running with a blood pressure of 190 over 110, and now we spiked it up a few degrees, could we have a stroke? Yes, but that's a contraindication, to that group of people. But there's a contraindication to taking, Sudafed as well, right? So, there's a lot of drugs out there that are going to, if you have an uncontrolled situation, are going to make you worse. And there's going to be caveats with everything like that, that if you have a disease process that's really bad, you probably need to be cautious with these things.
So you mentioned the word bolus, and one of my questions was, so I'm the kind of person who likes to see if things are really working. And the way I do that is the first time I use it, I'll take a really large dose and see if I feel anything. Positive or negative doesn't matter to me, because if I feel something, then I know it's doing something.
Right.
So 1 to 2 milligrams a day injected of GHK, you feel like is kind of like the place, the starting point to start to evaluate. What do you consider a bolus? Can I take 10 milligrams and just see if I notice pain changes or anything like that?
So, Dr. Pickard said 20 milligrams probably. You could go anywhere from 1 to 20 milligrams. So I guess you could bolus 20 milligrams. I mean, it might sit down in case you had rapid drop in your blood pressure, right? So you might want to lay on the couch while you did it. What I tend to do with my patients is start them low and then kind of work our way up till they feel things. The things I've heard, and I haven't done this peptide in a big, massive dose. I've only used it for a very short period, and it was more for kind of a healing effect. But the things I've heard is that when people do hit that sweet spot, they just feel really like if they had any pain, it goes away. They feel very, just peaceful, no anxiety. They just feel good. They feel happy. They feel less anxiety. They feel less pain. And that was a very rapid effect. I mean, they noticed that rapidly. So it may have, we can't measure the genetics effects, right? That's going to take time. And ways to measure it, but you can measure that you feel a little happier and you feel more peaceful pretty rapidly. So I think you could very safely stick 10 milligrams or 20 milligrams in yourself and see what happened, with the caveat being probably that drop in blood pressure you need to be cautious with.
What is rapidly? Minutes, hours, days?
I think it was fast. It was with you mean the effect
like how fast do you notice these?
It was within hours. They felt better.
Wow.
That they had this anti-anxiety effect that was very rapid.
So we've discussed pretty much throughout the show, we've peppered that this has epigenetic effects. And as you pointed out, when Harvard and MIT did that research, this was like a top line item that had the most profound effect on the largest number of healthy genes. So how long for the genetic changes do you think you have? Is this something that could I take 1 milligram a day for a long period of time, let's say years, and would it take time for me to see some of these more structural changes?
I think it probably depends on which genes, right? So I think there's certain genes that are going to be modified more easily than others. It's going to, so I think that when you ask that question, that probably depends on which genes you're following. I think that typically when we, I don't know that we have the answer to that because we don't have anybody who's measuring the epigenome every month to see if I did this, when to change. It's expensive and it's tedious to do that. Somologics, who's a proteomic company, remember our genome turns into our epigenome, turns into our proteins, can modify, because proteins are going to change first, but those are, you're going to see this expression, and those would be the easiest thing to measure rapidly. But I don't know that anybody has done enough ongoing every month, every 2 weeks, whatever it is, to see when that change occurs. I think we should sort of all go on 6 months. I suspect there's some changes that occur much more rapidly than that, because you can put people in situations, on the opposite extreme, into a stressful situation for as much as a week and actually see changes in their proteome.
Right.
So I suspect that the same thing can happen with the good positive changes. So I do think, and that's, again, it's too bad you can't do a genomics test every week when you make a change, right? So it's too bad we'd have to get an IRB and some funding. That's all. I mean, that's the hard thing, is these tests are, they take a long time. They're expensive. We need quicker, easier measurements. I do think, measuring proteins.
I like the idea. Yes, I like the idea of proteomics, because I never thought about it. But you're right, because we're seeing the downline effects of the genetic changes then.
Right. Exactly.
And we can measure those quickly.
Right? They're more easily measured than the epigenome. So, but I do suspect. I mean, we kind of will test people again at 6 months. It'd be much more useful to be able to get the data more rapidly. So I suspect that probably you would start seeing some epigenetic changes pretty rapidly. I mean, maybe weeks, but I don't know the answer to that.
So let's wrap this up by talking about the dosing again. So I know the dose can be anywhere from 1 to 20 milligrams, but we're talking about taking it on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. So the dosing should be what on a daily basis? A starting point.
Well, I think probably, the recommendation is usually 1 milligram. I think probably 2 milligram, probably for most people, is a better dose. It would become very expensive. You'd be talking about $300+ a month to do 2 milligrams a day. So we usually prescribe it at 1 milligram a day. But But I think that probably if you look at this peptide, a little higher is probably going to be a better dosing. And maybe even looking at like 4 milligrams a day, it's just, it becomes too expensive for most of us to continue at that level. So I think if you say, okay, realistically, what can we do that people might be able to say afford for a longer period of time? It probably is going to be looking at a 1 milligram and maximum 2 milligram dose. But do I think the ideal dose might be higher than that? Yeah, I do.
So from the research on idiopathic short stature, we know that giving a child, when you're trying to correct short stature, the same dose of growth hormone day in and day out is not as effective as taking that same exact dose on a weekly basis and splitting it up in more irregular injections. So instead of giving them, let's say 25 IUs a week is the goal. Let's do 20 because that's easy for me to do low numbers with. But instead of giving them, X IUs a day consistently 7 days a week, you go Monday, Wednesday, Saturday, and you're still getting the same amount total IUs per week, but the growth is greater. Could it be that a lot of peptides are like that, since growth hormone technically is a peptide, and maybe the magic would be like, instead of taking 2 milligrams a day, maybe take 4 milligrams every other day or something like that? Any ideas on that?
Yeah, I don't know. You're right that very many peptides, I think, are better off either cycling on and off, changing things up, or going on and off them on a daily basis. I don't know, because if you're looking at this from a more that this peptide seems to exert its most marked benefits by its genetic effects. We used to sort of blame it all on copper. Everything good it did was copper. We kind of don't think that anymore. And so if we're kind of looking more at the epigenetic, I don't know that maybe a more regular dose all the time wouldn't be better, because we're not looking for such binds to receptor. It does this. It's more, it's very constant regulation of the copper levels that's changing our genetics and changing our genetic expression. But I don't know the answer to that. I don't know that we don't have the research, particularly this peptide done with these sub-Q injections in this way. What is the best dose for this? We just don't have it.
Yeah. This is fascinating. Like I said, I've known about GHK forever. I've ignored it forever. I've talked about it before, but I literally am going to see about getting myself some, because this sounds like a peptide I definitely need.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be 62 next month, and I'm not gonna lie and say, oh yeah, I feel like I'm 35. I don't, and I want to do things that I know will improve how I feel and how I function. And this sounds like I'm going to be using it for a while and see what happens.
Yeah, I think me too. It's going to be one I'm going to add to my basic peptides.
I know. This is one of those. This is the vitamin C of peptides. This is like a foundational thing. You don't think about it. You just take it all the time. That's it.
Yeah, as long as we can get it.
BoulderLongevity.com is the place to go if you want to work with a physician who is forward-leaning, understands medicine, but also is looking to be on the bleeding edge of helping people. And everyone that works with Dr. Yurth sees the benefits that they're searching for. I'm just starting a 20-day run at a pretty high dose. Natalie, can you post what your dose is, please? Just curious. And even if it's, can't wait to see what happens. Just post the dose. I'd like to know what a pretty high dose is. I'd just like to know. But anyway, you can go to BoulderLongevity.com, reach out to Dr. Yurth and see results, and not results that you get from pharmaceutical drugs that you shouldn't be taking because they're hurting you. Thanks for being here today. Really.
Let me throw in hey guys, I love to teach, to educate people. I think you guys are what Carl does, and you guys going and spreading the word, because it's so important. We have a whole arm for Boulder Longevity. It's all just education. It's called Human Optimization Academy. You can go there, listen to some talks, so that you learn this stuff. I do a lot of webinars, through Facebook. Watch for those, because I think, this is a place where we have to build from you guys, from Carl bringing this stuff to you, you guys spreading it to your friends, because this is going to be how we sort of change the world. So thanks.
Thank you very much for being here today, and we'll have you back soon. I think the next talk we already picked out. We talked about it off the air, and this is going to be one about something. So, ironically, this one will attract more listeners because it's about fat loss. We're so vain, right? I don't get, remember Billy Crystal when he used to imitate Ricardo Montalban. You look marvelous, and we all know it's better to look marvelous than to feel marvelous. That's what we are. All right, take care. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, Carlos. Good to work with you again.
And we're going to take a quick commercial break, and when we come back, I'm going to wrap up the week. For those of you who've been in touch, stay tuned.
I love beef, and if you love beef, listen up. I've discovered the best tasting beef in the world, and that's not an exaggeration, at Piedmontese.com. The Piedmontese breed is famous from Italy for being lean and unbelievably tender with half the fat and calories of traditional beef. Even typically tough cuts are tender when it comes from the Piedmontese cows. And for the first time ever, Piedmontese cows are being raised here in the USA. Get 2 free 10-ounce New York strips when you purchase $50 or more at Piedmontese.com with code SHR. Go to PIEDMONTESE.com and use code SHR today. You will never eat any other type of beef ever again. Hey, this is Carl. For 14 years, you've heard me talk about Can-C eye drops, and they being the reason that I do not need reading glasses at now 61 years old. But I regularly get emails and messages from people who've been using Can-C and having some amazing results. Recently, I got an email from a fellow named Chad, who, because he was on dexamethasone eye drops for over 6 months, developed a cataract. Can-C eye drops actually reduced my cataract to the point where even my doctor has a hard time finding it. I will never stop using Can-C eye drops twice a day. I've been using them since 2008, he says. And you should be too. There is no better way to keep your eyes healthy and seeing clearly than Can-C eye drops. Go to wisechoicemedicine.com today and get on board, and we will both be looking into the future with very clear vision. Do you remember those delicious toaster pastries you had when you were a kid? You know, the rectangular sugar-filled snacks? Well, guess what? Legendary Foods has just made low-carb toaster pastry. This is the first of its kind, and honestly, these things are amazing. They have 3 to 4 net carb, less than 1 gram of sugar, and 9 grams of protein. You can eat them right out of the wrapper or lightly toast them. The only question is which flavor, strawberry or brown sugar cinnamon. They're available at eatlegendary.com and Amazon. I love beef, and if you love beef, listen up. I've discovered the best tasting beef in the world, and that's not an exaggeration, at Piedmontese.com. The Piedmontese breed is famous from Italy for being lean and unbelievably tender with half the fat and calories of traditional beef. Even typically tough cuts are tender when it comes from the Piedmontese cows. And for the first time ever, Piedmontese cows are being raised here in the USA. Get 2 free 10-ounce New York strips when you purchase $50 or more at Piedmontese.com with code SHR. Go to PIEDMONTESE.com and use code SHR today. You will never eat any other type of beef ever again. Imagine if you had a digital twin, one that you could compare your own health and fitness outcomes to, one that showed you whether or not the things you're doing, food you're eating, or drinks you're drinking are actually working for you or against you. Well, now you can. The first ever advanced epigenetic saliva test that compares 20 million different data points of your DNA to help predict what is aging you faster or keeping you younger is being introduced to my audience at a 70% discount from the normal price. Go to seeds.md/epigenetic-test today to learn how to get your own digital twin that will help you take the steps to live longer and stay stronger. Don't wait, because this is a limited time offer not available anywhere else. Once these tests are gone, they're gone. Again, go to seeds.md/epigenetic-test today to learn more.
This is the Superhuman Channel. Evolution just got kicked up a notch.
Welcome back. So, a couple things I want to cover real quick, and then let everybody go have a good weekend. Natalie, thanks for sharing that. Those of you who are sticking with us through the break, Natalie is using 5 milligrams a day. I just ordered some, and I will be probably starting out at 4 to 5 milligrams a day as well. I'll be glad to compare notes with you, Natalie. I want to talk about this peptide for a second because they're not all created equal. The GHK peptide, I just found out. It's I get my peptides at Peptide Sciences. Most of you know that. And there is a coupon code that you can use, SHR, for 10% off your order. And they don't pay me anything. I pay money for my peptides, and I just know that they're reliable. They put mass spec assays of every peptide up on their website. People always say to me, how do you know you could trust them? Well, they actually have third-party testing done, and they actually sell to universities and labs. They make their GHK peptide to the exact specs that Dr. Lauren Picard, he's the leading expert on GHK. He dedicated his entire career to studying it, and they actually worked with his lab to perfect the production of this peptide. So it's important to understand this, because this may be why some peptides work and some don't. There is some nuances to making these peptides. So if you go to peptidesciences.com, use the code SHR, and you'll save 10% off your order. Also, I'm so excited. So I've been depressed. I haven't trained at all this week, and I feel different. I don't feel good. I feel old. I got to be honest with you. I don't feel old when I'm training every day. And it's no wonder that there are people out there who are depressed about this pandemic. It's not just for me, it's not the staying in, because I'm not in. I've been doing the same things every day forever. Normally I leave the house, go to the gym and train, leave the gym, come to the studio and work, leave the studio, go home and eat a meal with Elisa, get back to work. I watch 1 hour of television 5 days a week. That's it. I don't dedicate a lot of time to TV. I don't have the time. The only thing that's been missing is going to the gym for me. And I thought I was going to crush it. I thought, I bought an Airdyne AD6 so I can do high intensity interval training. I already have power blocks, kettlebells, bands. I have a lot of stuff at home to train. It's just not the same. I love going into the gym. I love it. For over 20 years, it's been my morning regimen, and it's just been stolen from me. And so I don't feel really great right now. And I know June 1st, our governor, he thinks he's well-meaning, but he's not. He's making more people sick, and he's harming more people, because more people kill themselves by being broke right now. But he said June 1st is when gyms will start to open up again. And for those of you who've missed this week's shows, you ask any virologist, if we locked down in place, if everybody stayed in their own house, if the government gave them all the money they needed, they didn't have to worry about losing their house, losing their jobs, and the government gave the companies all the money they needed that they didn't have to go out of business. If we stayed in the house for 6 months, hell, a year, when we came back out, would the virus be dead? They'll tell you, oh no, it'll start spreading again. See, viruses don't die. When you contract the virus and you build up an antibody, chances are you still have the virus. You just don't feel affected from it anymore. So when you come in contact with other people, they get the virus. So you can't wait this virus out. You can't hunker down and say, well, we're going to kill it. It doesn't die. It will start to spread again. This is why as soon as we open up the country, the idiots are going to start saying, see, people are dying again. Yes, death is an unfortunate part of life. But if you look at who's dying, all of them are either fall into a couple different classes. Very, very ill people. You have heart problems already. You couldn't run 6 blocks if you had to do it to save your life. You're going to die from this virus. But the other people that are dying, as we know now that it's coming out in nursing homes, are elderly people, 80 years and above, and they would die from the flu. That's why they are the largest part that go out and get the vaccine, but they still get the flu those years that they get the vaccine. The reality is that we cannot wait this virus out, and the longer we take this approach, the longer it's going to be with us. Because once we get out and about, and the virus goes through our population, and sadly, it's going to kill some people. Yes, hey, maybe it'll kill me. My daughter called me this morning because my son wants to come and visit, And she's telling me, oh, Dad, what are you, crazy? You're in that age group. I know I'm in that age group, but I'm not going to die from this virus because I have a strong heart, strong lungs. I'm fit. This isn't going to kill me. And I'm confident of that. I know that. Plus, I know that azithromycin will knock it out of you. I'd get 2 Z-Packs from my doctor. I'd take them 10 days in a row. It will be gone. And how do I know that? Listen to my shows. I've done shows on it. But anyway, we can't wait this virus out. The only way we're going to end this plague, if you will, is to get back to life. And sadly, some people are going to die. Now, if you're one of those people that's high risk, you're unhealthy, you're unfit, you have comorbidities, then you have to take special precautions. You should stay home. You should wear masks. You should do all those things. But the rest of us don't have to. We don't have to. So it's very, very misguided. Our governor is doing the same thing. And he's not going to open the gyms till June 1st. And it's just stupid. We have politicians who don't understand science. Has he ever interviewed a virologist and asked him, will this go away if we stay indoors long enough? The virologist said, oh, no, it's not going to go away. It's going to, as soon as we start moving around again, it's going to come back. So I've been pretty sad and I've been a little depressed, and I got to be honest with you. And so I did something to help with my depression. And it's arriving today. It'll be here at 5:30. That's my new motorcycle right there. Yes, sir. I haven't had a motorcycle since I was in my early 20s. And before that, that's all I had. I didn't have a car. I used to borrow my father's car when I had to use a car. But other than that, I had a motorcycle. And a motorcycle has been my first choice of transportation for the early years of my adult life. And I'm not going to use it to commute back and forth to the office. I mean, maybe I will once in a while if it's a beautiful day. But what I'm really looking forward to is me and Elisa getting on it and going out into the country. We have such beautiful countryside here in Kentucky. It's ridiculous. So we bought this motorcycle so that we can go do things and have fun and be adventurous. But it will be here today. It's 3:20 now. It should be here between 5:30 and 6. And I'll be, unfortunately, it's raining today. But it may have stopped raining since I've been in here. But I have miraculously, I feel excited again. I don't feel all depressed about the COVID virus and the shutdown. So I'm excited about that. Ben Turner Dixon has a comment. Let's read it here. I appreciate you sharing as always, Carl. Just wrapping up a round of 2 milligrams daily for 50 days of GHK-cu. Feel great, and skin has dramatically improved. Thank you for sharing this, Ben. Hard to say if the GHK directly, is it directly, as I've been on some other compounds as well. He's like me. That's why I can never tell what's working. I feel in order again, and I'm trying to read this here. He can't attribute it to the GHK for being the way he feels because he's on other things, but he's going to order it again after a few months and go for a higher daily dosage. I'd love to hear back from you, Ben, after you try that. I just placed my order during one of the commercial breaks from Peptide Sciences, and I am excited to get it. And I'm probably going to start out at about 2 milligrams a day just to see for the first week, but then I'm going to go up pretty fast. I think I'm going to be where Natalie is. I'm going to be at 5 milligrams a day. And if it makes me feel great, I'll keep buying it and taking it at that dose. What the hell? I mean, there's lots of other things I can waste my money on. I don't waste my money on booze. I don't waste my money on lots of other frivolous things. I definitely don't waste my money on clothes. Any of you who've been watching me for any amount of time know that I just wear the same clothes over and over again. I am never going to be accused of being a clothes horse. That's for sure. Those things aren't important to me. Knowledge is important to me, and family and life. Those are the things that are important to me in that order. All right, look, it's been a fun week. If you haven't listened to some of the shows this week, they've been great. Go back and listen to them. We have a great week planned for next week. Of course, Elisa Profumo is booking all of my guests now, and that's why we have so many great interviews. Keep in touch. Share the show. Change some lives. You can be responsible for helping people and changing lives by sharing the show, of course. And visit the website, superhumanradio.net, to find out what's going on. Sign on to our newsletter. We don't barrage people with information. We send out only when we have something good to talk about, like an existing show. And that's it for this week. Have fun, stay safe, and don't be afraid of COVID-19. Live life. That's the first step. Live life.